I was 26 and practical to a fault. The kind of person who could tell you APRs and maintenance schedules, but still took the bus because a new car felt like an indulgence I hadn't earned yet. My job, junior account lead at a boutique marketing firm, paid the bills and then some. But the math never came out clean when I let myself daydream in dealership windows. I kept a spreadsheet labeled someday filled with trim packages and colors and laughable insurance quotes. A private museum of restraint masquerading as ambition. On Friday afternoons, when the office thinned and the coffee turned sour, I'd scroll it like a rosary and promise myself that patience was a kind of power. Clara complicated that math. She always had. She was my best friend's mother first in the way that a title becomes a fence, polite, fixed, and visible from every angle. But she was also Clara Rivera, the director of a luxury showroom that treated automobiles the way galleries treat sculpture. When she walked a floor, salesmen straightened their spines as if their vertebrae were on commission. She spoke softly and people leaned in. I had been around that gravity for years, cookouts, birthdays, stray holidays where I arrived with a pie and left with advice I didn't know I needed. She carried herself like a solution, crisp suits, measured gestures, the calm of a person who knew the price of things and the cost. There were details my eyes hoarded without permission. The way she tapped a fingernail, bare, no lacquer, against a contract before signing. The slight, unguarded sigh she let out when she thought no one was watching. As if she had just set down a bag only she could feel. The laugh that came in two parts, a professional chuckle first and, if she actually liked you, a quieter exhale that felt like being let in from the rain. Admiration, when held at arm's length, can look like maturity. I told myself I was simply taking notes on competence. At 4:17 p.m. on a Friday heavy with heat, my phone lit up with her name. The message was clean and unadorned, as if it had been typed with a ruler. There's a new model in no one has driven yet. Want a test drive tonight? Showroom will be just me. I stared long enough for the screen to dim and wake again. An invitation is also a mirror. It shows you the reasons you might say yes and the excuses you'll pretend are reasons to say no. The part of me that loved numbers lined up objections like traffic cones. Conflict of interest. She's my friend's mother. Optics. After hours. Just us. Misreading. What if this was merely professional generosity and I arrived wearing a different language? My thumb hovered over polite decline. Over rain check. Over the safest variation of I'm busy that wouldn't be a lie. Underneath the cones, though, was the quieter arithmetic of desire. It wasn't only the car, though the thought of unspooling an untouched engine on an empty road tugged at me like a dare. It was the parenthetical in her message, showroom will be just me. 4 words that adjusted the lighting on everything I thought I understood. I found myself remembering small conversations at crowded tables when our eyes met and held a beat longer than courtesy requires. Remembering the way she'd asked me last month, almost idly, whether the work was challenging me enough, whether I felt I was being seen. Seen, the word had landed with a small, private ache. I typed, erased, typed again. Sounds incredible. Are you sure tonight works? Erased. Thank you for thinking of me. I don't want to inconvenience. Erased. In the end I sent a simple question. An engineer's compromise. Which model? A beat later, the Asterion prototype. Off record. No press. I trust you. Trust is the kind of word that inflates a room. I felt my chest expand against it. The office around me hummed its end-of-week fatigue. Someone laughing too loudly in the corridor. The printer huffing out a last-minute proposal. The clink of mugs being rinsed. I could already see the showroom after hours. The way polished floors hold onto the day's light like a memory. I imagined the keys in her hand. The arc they would trace between us. Small and decisive. Before I could talk myself into caution and call it wisdom, I typed, I'll be there. What time? 7. Take the employee entrance. I'll leave it unlocked. The hour between promise and departure is the longest kind of hour. I packed slowly as if speed might expose my eagerness. Shut down my laptop with a reverence I didn't feel. and told a coworker I had dinner plans. On the train home I watched my reflection stagger and merge with the city in the window. A double exposure of who I had been that morning and the person rehearsing what he might say when he walked into a silent cathedral of chrome. The closer I got to my apartment, the louder the caution grew again. Boundaries. Appearances. The delicate ecosystem of friendships. I pictured Jason, the friend on the other end of that title. Generous and easy, the kind of man who would give you his last clean t-shirt without comment. A good man deserves a world without complications. I tried to imagine the precise phrasing I would use if this turned into a story that required telling. I failed. At home I changed shirts twice, laughing at myself because it felt like a date and insisting it didn't. I settled on something neutral and clean, a middle lane that couldn't be accused of trying. The sun was angling down into the kind of evening that makes the city look like it's posing. My hands on the steering wheel of my old hatchback felt both confident and inadequate. A small metaphor I pretended not to notice. Traffic loosened near the river, and with it my thoughts. There is a particular freedom in deciding to appear, not to angle for, not to retreat from, but to simply show up to the version of the moment that is being offered. If this was only generosity, I would accept it as such. If it was something else, the if that made my pulse miscount, I would learn its shape in the room where it lived. The dealership's facade was a geometry of glass and light. At 6:58 I pulled into a side lot where the asphalt still held the day's warmth. The main doors were dark. The reflection of the street held like a second lobby. I circled to the service alley, found the side door with the keypad, and rested my palm on the metal bar. It gave with a soft complaint. The kind of sound buildings make when they're willing to trust you. Inside, the temperature dropped to the curated cool of expensive objects. The air had the faint sweetness of new leather and the clean hush of a museum after closing. Over the mezzanine railing, cars shimmered under low light, silhouettes and intentions. A single lamp glowed in the far office like a small stage. "Ethan," her voice came from behind me and didn't startle so much as arrange me. I turned. Clara was walking down the stair with the unhurried certainty that the space belonged to her and, by extension, to whomever she chose to invite into it. She wasn't in one of her armored suits. Dark trousers, a pale blouse, sleeves rolled, an ease I had never seen on her in daylight. It made her look younger and, paradoxically, more powerful, as if she had put down a role and picked up herself. "You made good time," she said, and her smile reached her eyes in that second, private way. For a moment we simply stood there in the bleached quiet, the echo of my name still soft at the edges. All the sensible sentences I'd practiced scattered like birds. "I was curious," I said, which was true enough to stand upright. "About the car." I let the last two words carry more weight than they needed to. Her gaze flicked to my mouth and back. A quick edit only someone watching for it would catch. "Good," she said. "Curiosity is the beginning of competence." She gestured toward the floor. "Come on, let me show you something no one else has touched." I followed her down into the cool, bright open like a swimmer entering water. Aware of the surface tension. Aware of the depth. Somewhere above us, the city continued its evening, buses sighing, couples choosing tables, emails darting through the dark, but here the world had narrowed to two sets of footsteps and the gleam of an outline beneath the fitted cover. I told myself this was about a machine and the pleasure of its promise. The part of me that knew better went quiet and listened. The showroom wears night differently than it wears day. In daylight the place is a marketplace. A choreography of smiles and polished sentences. After hours, the light goes low and amber, and each car seems to become the idea of itself. Sound changes, too, voices evaporate and what's left is the hollow conversation of the building with its own air, a far-off compressor cycling. The soft tick of settling metal. The whisper of the climate system moving around money. The smell is sharper now that nothing interrupts it. Leather and the faint, clean bite of machined alloy. A hint of adhesive that never entirely leaves something factory new. It felt like standing in a museum that exhaled. Clara let the door sigh shut behind us and for a moment we simply stood in the hush. letting our eyes adjust to the way the light pulled. She moved with that economy of motion I'd always noticed, no wasted gesture, no hurry, and then surprised me. "Give me a minute," she said, and slipped into her office. When she reappeared, the day had been edited off her. Gone were the trousers and rolled sleeves. In their place a simple dress that didn't announce itself so much as refine the outline of her. It was the sort of choice confident people make when they no longer require armor. The fabric caught the warm light, and with her hair gathered loosely at the nape, she looked less like an executive and more like someone who had chosen the room for herself. Not for show. She watched my eyes clock the change and let me see that she'd noticed. Not coy, not performative, just a quiet acknowledgement of mutual awareness. "Ready?" she asked, and I found that the word landed in me in two separate places, the part that liked taut curves and the part that was suddenly fully aware of my own posture. We crossed the floor toward a shape sleeping under a fitted cover. Even under the fabric, the car had a stance that suggested balance and intent, a center of gravity you could trust. Clara walked in front of me, and the small echo of our steps kept time with something quicker in my chest. She paused, glanced at me as if to confirm I was present in the right way, then took a corner of the cover and drew it back in a single, unbroken line. It wasn't theatrics, it was ritual. The way a conductor raises a hand not to be seen but to set the room's first breath. The Asterian prototype was calmer than the photographs I had stolen online suggested. No unnecessary vents or aggressive flourishes. A car that looked like it would do exactly what it said at any speed. The paint was a color that refused an easy name, somewhere between deep gray and ocean at night, and the studio lights found long, slow reflections across its surfaces as if they had been briefed. I stepped closer without meaning to. Clara's reflection arrived next to mine in the door glass. Our faces near but not touching. A temporary overlay. "Open it," she said softly. The door released with the dignified click of well-made things. The first breath inside was warmer. Leather and a whisper of ozone that reminded me all at once that electricity could be elegant. The cabin seemed to be designed around the idea that the driver's spine mattered, that decisions begin somewhere below thought and above fear. I sank into the seat and felt a small recalibration run up my back. Like something that had been misaligned quietly finding its track. Clara rounded the nose and slid into the passenger side with that same unhurried certainty. A lot of people look different when they sit. Some deflate. Some reveal restlessness. She kept her height, the invisible line from crown to hips unbroken. One knee angled toward me as if the car had drawn us into an intentional triangle. She watched my hands find the wheel. Not judgmental, observant, collecting data the way I imagined she collected it when a client told her what they thought they wanted. "Before we even move," she said, "tell me what you notice." I let my fingers rest lightly at 9 and 3. The leather was cool, textured just enough to register without demanding. "It wants small inputs," I said. "Feels like if you grip too hard, you'll make it nervous, like holding someone's wrist when you mean to hold their hand." I surprised myself with the analogy and waited to be embarrassed by it. But Clara's mouth curved. "A private point scored. That's close to it," she said. "People think power is about pressure. Most of the time it's about attention." She reached forward and adjusted the steering column a fraction. Not because it was wrong but because she had noticed the way my shoulders lifted. "There, now the car will meet you instead of you trying to meet it." We sat without speaking for a few beats. The car ticking once as something deep in it adjusted to our weight. I could feel her eyes on the side of my face. Not undressing me but reading me. The way a good teacher reads what you're ready for. Being looked at like that can make some people smaller. It made me calm. It made me want to be precise. "What do you expect when the lights go green?" she asked. "Nothing dramatic," I said, smiling. "Honesty. No surprises between input and outcome. That's my definition of a good man," she said, deadpan enough that I wasn't sure if it was a joke. The comment hung there, not heavy, but structural. She watched me absorb it and didn't rescue me from the silence. I rested my hand on the start switch and didn't press. "Are we actually going out?" I asked. Or is this a meditation class disguised as a test drive? It can be both. She leaned back, the dress moving like a single piece of thought. Driving isn't about speed. It's about who's choosing. Some men mistake panic for momentum. Some mistake hesitation for caution. The ones who learn how to create calm inside a moving thing, those are the ones I trust. Create calm inside a moving thing, I repeated, as if tasting a phrase. My pulse had slowed. The room felt like it had accepted us. And if something unexpected happens, then I watch what your hands do before your mouth does, she said, and this time the joke was obvious but also not. Her eyes flicked to the mirror, then back to me. She wasn't flirting in the loose, reckless way of people who want to be caught. She was calibrating. Where do you place responsibility? How much of your body do you offer to a moment? Can you hear what isn't being said when the room is whispering? I pressed the switch. The car woke without theatrics. A low, civilized hum that seemed to come from the floor more than the engine bay. Instruments lit in a font that refused to shout. I felt the smallest vibration through the seat. A promise rather than a boast. Clara's hand rested lightly on the center tunnel, palm open, as if to demonstrate the kind of contact she'd been describing. You'll take it easy until the tires know us, she said, not because I'm worried about the car, because I'm interested in your caution. Caution is a shape. You can draw it with too many corners. I know the neighborhood, I said, easing the selector into drive. There's a long, quiet stretch by the rail yard. Good, she said. You plan routes. That's another thing I trust. We didn't move yet. Instead, we let the idea of movement build a little pressure, like water behind a clean valve. It gave the airtime to thicken with something neither of us named. Up close, I could see the tiny sunlines at the corner of her eye that only appear when someone has laughed honestly in daylight. Her perfume was minimal, almost a rumor, and I realized how deliberately she chose what to amplify and what to leave at the edge of perception. Why me? I asked, and it came out more plainly than I intended. The question wasn't hungry. It wanted facts. She turned in the seat to face me more directly. Because you listen with your hands, she said. Because you don't confuse wanting with deserving. Because when I've watched you make decisions, you don't perform them, you make the room quieter. She smiled, small, like a light through a cracked door. And because you asked which model before you asked what time. A laugh escaped me, not nervous this time. The tension in my chest rearranged itself into something more useful. I let the brakes ease, felt the car begin to roll, a gentle, frictionless beginning, and realized that whatever tonight was, generosity, test, some third thing we were both cautious enough not to label yet, it had already started before the wheels turned. The showroom lights slid across the hood as we aimed for the service exit. And in the glass I caught our reflection again. Pilot and co-pilot, two silhouettes drawn by the same line. At the threshold I paused. Foot firm, hands light. Tell me if I'm reading this wrong, I said. The car, the room, you. If you were, she said, gaze level, we wouldn't be in the car. She let the sentence sit. Then added, softer, what matters isn't whether you're brave. It's whether you can make room for someone else's fear without losing the wheel. I nodded once, as if agreeing with a set of instructions I'd been given years ago and finally understood. Outside, the night waited without hurry. Inside, a quiet expanded between us that felt less like distance and more like runway. I eased us forward, and the door lifted obediently, a mouth opening to the dark. The city fell away in neat increments, a loading dock, a shuttered bakery, a row of sodium lamps failing at romance. The prototype moved like a thought I was finishing as I had it. Clara watched the world and me at the same time, a dual attention that made me aware of how often most people pick one. We took the long, empty stretch by the rail yard, the asphalt dark and wide as a held breath. If the road ahead is blocked, what do you do? She asked, not as a quiz but as if she were taking inventory of a language. I don't ask the car to be a battering ram, I said, easing off a fraction to feel the chassis settle. I slow enough to see all the exits. Signal early so anyone watching knows my intention. If there's truly no way through, I turn without apology. Without apology, she repeated. Approval lived at the edge of her mouth. Most people apologize to the problem while they drive into it. A cyclist ghosted across an intersection. A pale flash under a dying streetlight. The car's brakes were the opposite of drama. Pressure translated to inevitability, and I felt her notice the way my shoulders stayed down. When pressure builds, she said, voice level, do you accelerate to clear it or brake to absorb it? Neither, I said, surprised at the certainty in my own answer. I make space, change lanes, downshift. Pressure isn't the same as pace. She turned her head, studying the profile of my answer. Downshift, she murmured, like a word she liked in her mouth. We passed the siding where boxcars sleep, each one a blunt sentence. The night thinned. A stray dog loped kingly across the boulevard. Indifferent to our engineered grace. Clara's hand rested open on the console again. Not touching me, an invitation to meet steadiness with steadiness. She wasn't testing reflexes. She was mapping the border between instinct and choice. A second question arrived folded inside the first. You ever force a situation just to prove you can? I used to, I said. The hum of the motor made my voice sound closer to me. It felt like proof. Now it feels like noise. Noise is expensive, she said, almost to herself. In engines, in people. We made a slow arc back toward the river. The car translating small movements into large confidence. I recognized the particular calm that comes when a machine lets you be more yourself instead of more of it. Every time I checked a mirror, I caught her looking at my hands before my eyes. A private joke she'd already told me. In front of the dealership, the glass threw our approach back at us. I rolled up to the service door and let the car idle while the sensor did its quiet thinking. Inside, the air was the same curated cool, the same amber constellations of lamp and paint. I parked where the light gathered, let my palm rest on the wheel a second longer than necessary, and powered down. The sudden silence was not empty. It had aftertaste. She didn't move right away. Then, that was careful without being timid. She said, rare. I wasn't trying to impress you. I said, and heard how true it was. I was trying to leave room for the car to tell me what it wanted. Clara turned to me fully. The line of her shoulders square. Eyes bright in the low light. The test went well, she said, but the real test hasn't started. I considered a dozen clever answers and let them die. What does it ask? Not speed, not skill, she said, standing, the dress moving like a decision. Clarity. She led the way across the floor, past the silent cars that now felt like witnesses. At the far wall a door I hadn't noticed earlier opened with her keycard, revealing a room that didn't belong to the showroom's public self. Soft carpet, dark glass, a table that made pens feel ceremonial, the VIP room where signatures became futures. She held the door, and the look she gave me was not permission so much as invitation to be responsible for what I was about to want. I stepped through, aware that thresholds are only ever obvious after you've crossed them. The room had the kind of quiet you don't get by accident. It was engineered, thick carpet, weighty glass, the door's gasket settling into place with a sound like a book closing. Beyond the pane, the lot was a field of sleeping silhouettes, hoods catching a smear of streetlight, chrome turning moon pale. The city moved out there, sirens, laughter, the throb of a bass line, but here the noise arrived filtered. Distant enough to feel like weather you could choose to ignore. Clara crossed to the sideboard and selected a bottle without deliberation, the way people do when the choice is less about taste and more about ritual. The cork slid free with a soft, domestic sigh. 2 glasses took turns under the angle of her wrist. The wine threw a muted ruby against the wood. She handed me a glass and kept hers loose in her fingers rather than by the stem, as if claiming warmth on purpose. After the divorce, she said, not looking away, I learned that success is louder than loneliness. During the day, it drowns everything, phones, meetings, handshakes, and then you go home and the house doesn't echo back. She didn't dramatize the words. They were polished from use, like stones turned in a pocket until they were smooth enough to carry without blood. I told her the truth I'd been editing for years. That I had always watched her moving through rooms as if the rooms were grateful. That I'd filed her under things I wasn't allowed to want because wanting them would expose what I didn't have. That the distance didn't make her less compelling, it produced a gravity. Even now, with the suit replaced by a simple dress, she looked less armored and somehow more herself, closer and further at once. I heard the admission and braced for it to sound young. It didn't. She received it without flinch or flourish. Only that small narrowing of the eyes that means a person has added a sentence to your biography. Silence built with intention, the kind that tests whether two people can breathe on the same beat. We each took slow sips. Not for the wine but for the pause the act allowed. Her gaze was calibrated rather than hungry. It moved across my face as if checking tolerances, jaw, mouth, the tiny muscles at the edge of the eyes that betray people who rush. Up close, the tidy cruelty of fluorescent worklights was gone. The warm LEDs made her skin look like a decision had been made and held. She set her glass down with a sound precise enough to be punctuation and stepped closer into the honest part of the light. "The car may be expensive," she said, voice low and exact, "but this test is worth more. I want to know if you have the courage not to miss what's in front of you." She didn't weaponize the sentence. She laid it between us like a document requiring two signatures. Courage is a strange thing in rooms like this. It isn't about lunging. It's about the willingness to be seen wanting without camouflage. I felt all the obvious answers crowd my mouth: clever, deferential, safe, and let each one pass unchosen. The HVAC hummed in the vents high above. A patrol car idled somewhere on the far street. My heart, traitor and ally, found a steady rhythm as if matching the buildings. When I did step toward her, it wasn't a decision so much as the end of a long argument with myself. The floor gave that soft underfoot yield expensive carpet has. The kind designed to steal sound. Her eyes didn't widen in cinematic surprise. Instead, a subtle relief unfurled, like a muscle allowed to unclench. Up close I could smell the thumbprint of her perfume, citrus resolved into something darker, and the mineral hint of wine on her breath. "You carry quiet with you," she said, softer now, as if confidentiality had lowered its voice. "That's rarer than people think." The compliment didn't preen me. It steadied me. I told her that being near her made the instinct to perform go slack. That she asked for presence rather than posture. Saying it exposed the scaffolding I'd learned to live on: competence as costume, jokes as bridge, deference as currency, and in the exposure I felt a strange, clean relief. Her hand rose halfway, paused, one last test of consent, then settled lightly against my chest. Not possessive, measuring the engine there. I let my breath find her palm. The room telescoped, the table a continent away, the glass throwing our joined outline into the window as a suggestion rather than a photograph. I could feel us both taking inventory of the moment's weight. What we were risking: her authority, my friendship with her son, the story we'd have to write if this became truth. What we were claiming: mutuality, the right to choose despite the map other people placed over us. "I won't chase you," she said, not as threat but standard. "And I won't hide." The terms were clean. They turned what could have been drift into agreement. I heard myself answer in the same register, promising not heat but clarity. Not possession but presence. The relief again, agreement as oxygen. For a span that felt both held and bottomless, we did nothing except allow proximity to say what words would only ornate. The glass pane showed the lot's dim geometry. Cars like patient animals. Somewhere a motion sensor blinked awake and slept again. The world did what it always did, continued. We, for once, did not rush to keep up. When our mouths finally found each other, it was without theatrics, no staged urgency. It felt like two careful people trusting their own calibration. The first contact was mostly stillness. Then a small negotiation, the tilt of her head, the answering angle of mine. It was, in its restraint, an honesty hard to counterfeit. Behind my ribs something eased. Some hinge I hadn't known was stiff. We separated by inches, breath mingling, and stood with the quiet you earn, not the quiet you wait for. I could feel the line we had crossed. Not as trespass but as entry. There would be consequences, choreography, conversations owed, for the length of that moment. Though, we were simply two people in a room designed for signatures, choosing a different kind of contract. She smiled, small and unguarded, and I felt the room shift its weight to accommodate what we had admitted. We left the room as if stepping off a stage we hadn't announced we were on. The gasket gave up its seal with that soft hush again, and the showroom accepted us back without comment. Out beyond the glass, the lot had thinned to a geometry of guard lights and long shadows. A moth worried one bulb, making the light stutter like a thought. Somewhere, a vacuum murmured and went silent. The building's night self had fully returned. Clara walked a pace ahead, not rushing, collecting the little logistics that make leaving look like having been there on purpose. Glass returned to the sideboard. A switch touched, a glance to confirm a door that would lock itself. At the top of the stairs she paused and waited for me to come even with her. The pause contained a check of many things at once: my face, my steadiness, the echo in me of what we'd chosen. When we started down, our footsteps sounded less like two people and more like one rhythm spread across two bodies. By the service exit she turned, and the amber light put a clean edge on her features. "No one needs to know about this test drive," she said, not furtive, measured. The sentence was about stewardship rather than fear. "I understand," I answered, and did. My agreement wasn't a surrender but a boundary. I thought of Jason, of the way good men deserve uncomplicated maps, of the tender economy of reputation in a city that pretends it doesn't gossip. Holding a secret and hiding a shame are different verbs. What we had done belonged to the first. We stepped into the heat-sweet night. The door settled back into its frame with a soft, definitive click. The lot was nearly empty now, the rows of cars like patient chess pieces waiting for morning hands. Security lamps cast cones of light I could move in and out of like different moods. The thrill in me didn't spike, it widened, a current running level and bright. I could still feel the carefulness of her mouth, the deliberate grammar of that first kiss, and beneath it the sense that we had not been reckless so much as precise. She walked me toward my car as if escorting a guest from a successful negotiation. The small talk we allowed ourselves was mercifully real: traffic on the bridge at this hour, the weather deciding whether to rain, a joke about how the prototype had manners. She didn't reach for my hand and I didn't reach for hers. Restraint wasn't a denial. It was a way to keep the room we had built intact for a few more minutes. "Are you all right?" she asked, which was not a question about nerves. It was an inquiry into alignment. "I am," I said, surprised by the accuracy of it. Not dizzy, not sorry. The words felt like a calibration complete. She nodded the way leaders nod when a thing lines up with the map they keep in their head. "I don't want to live loud," she said, "but I will not live small." The terms had been clear inside the room. Here, under the watch of a single buzzing bulb, they became a compact I could feel in my hands. At my car she stopped. There was another moment where cinematic instincts could have made themselves useful and didn't. She set her palm against the window frame, a lightly claimed inch of metal, and looked at me without adornment. The day had been almost erased from her face. What remained was the ease of a person who had allowed herself to want and survived. "I'll lock up," she said. "Take the side street to avoid the light on 10th. Saves 2 minutes." Practical again, a shared world returning. I wanted to say something ceremonial and chose not to. We were not an occasion. We had made a decision. Driving away felt like stepping back into a familiar suit after being measured for something tailored. The old hatchback's engine hummed its humble, honest hum. Streetlights cut our shadows apart and stitched them together again against the median. I rode the calm of a well-made choice. The way you sit in the pocket of a song once you found it. My phone stayed dark on the passenger seat. A good dog. At an empty intersection, I let the car idle and listened to the neighborhood's breathing, the sprinkler ticking in a pocket park. A late laugh from a balcony. The distances making sense. At home the rooms were the same and not. The lamp's circle of light felt more intentional. I put water on, because hot water gives restless hands something human to do, and stood at the sink while the kettle gathered itself. I thought about what we had risked and what we had earned. Risk was paperwork, names, proximities, the social math of who learns what when. Earning was quieter, a kind of rightness that didn't need a witness. The tea steeped into a color I liked and I let it. Sleep came in pieces and then all at once. When I woke, the memory didn't arrive as image but as posture, shoulders down. Breath, even, the feeling that I had not been asked to perform even at my most exposed. Work the next day was fluorescent and harmless. I answered emails as if arranging furniture. I made 3 calls and told the truth inside each one without theater. In spare moments I let possibilities move through audit, boundaries, pacing, how to be reliable without being available to rumor. Secrecy, I decided, wouldn't mean disappearing, it would mean showing up with more fidelity than explanation. Days carry themselves when you let them. The weeks stretched and folded. Once, in line for coffee, I almost texted something tender and unspecific and instead wrote it on the back of a receipt. Proof for myself that desire could be kept literate without being loud. I passed the showroom one evening on the train and didn't turn my head, which felt like its own kind of regard. Her message arrived on a Tuesday at 11:06 a.m. A moment aggressively ordinary. The preview on the lock screen was almost comically neutral. New model just in. When are you free for the next test drive? No emoji, no residue. The professionalism of a person who understands both the value of records and the power of what doesn't require them. I read it twice for what it said and a third time for what it made possible. My reply was short enough to be deniable and clear enough to be true. We matched a day and an hour with the efficiency of people who had decided not to waste either. After I hit send, I looked at my hands on the desk. They were steady in the particular way they get when the wheel belongs to them. The office noise rose and fell around me, a stapler's bark. Someone's laugh doing its afternoon rounds, and I felt that widening current again. Not the spike of a secret but the brightness of a task chosen. This time, I knew exactly where I was driving.